Ready to go then?
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me? My name is Fiona O'Callaghan. I work in the Reform Division of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And myself and the team have a responsibility as the TSI National Coordinating Authority for the 2022 funding. It's great to see so many departments and public service organisations represented here today. We had over 150 registered for the event. Particular welcome this morning to our Minister of State with special responsibility for public procurement and e-government, Oisin Smith, TD, and to the Director of DG Reform from the Commission, Natalie Berger, who's here along with her colleagues from the DG Reform, Alistair, Lara, Mina, Roman and Louise. We're also going to be joined by our colleagues Philip Newsom and Ciara Hart from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, whose project in the past has benefited from the TSI support. Just for information for everybody attending today, we are going to record the session, so therefore we will send you links following that for people that couldn't make it today. Just quickly, you would have got details of the programme already, just running very quickly through it. We'll have opening remarks from the Minister of State and some introductory remarks from Natalie Berger, the Director in Reform. Then Laura is going to bring us through a practical guide to TSI. We'll have details of previous funded project in Ireland, as I said, from Philip Newsom. And then we're going into areas of the flagship projects which are available this year under the TSI support. And we will have Mina, Roman and Louise giving us some details on that. We will take questions during the session, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat function down on the bottom right of your screen. And if you could direct them to all panelists. Alistair McIver, who is our policy officer and country representative for TSI, will moderate on that, and then we'll close around 12:30. So sorry for all that. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the Minister of State, Oisin Smith. Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Fiona, for inviting me here today, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for attending this session. So, as you probably know, this is an information session about how to apply for a specific type of funding from the Commission. We're going to give you some help and some guidelines, and we're going to give you some practical experience from people who've received the funding in the past. And we've also got people here from the Commission. We're delighted to have Natalie Berger, as announced, Director for Member State Reforms from DG Reform, and we have other representatives from DG Reform who can explain how you apply for this money and what the conditions are and so on. Okay, so the TSI, the Technical Support Instrument, is the EU programme that provides tailor-made expertise to EU member states to design and implement reforms. The support is demand-driven and it does not require co-financing from member states, which is really important. You know, usually you need to find another source of funding, or there's often matched funding, and in this case, it's 100% funding. And in addition to that, as far as I understand, and I can be corrected on this, is that the Commission does all the procurement on these projects. So once you're getting 100% funding, but you're also getting the Commission doing the difficult business of procuring. And you do have a role in administering the contracts and managing it and working on it afterwards. But really, it is great to have all that support, all that work done for you. You know, it's an important pillar of the EU's initiative to help member states to mitigate the economic and social consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. So, you know, obviously part of the fallout of COVID-19 is a lot of changes in people's behaviour and what they're used to and what they're willing, how they're willing to work. And that creates opportunities for long-lasting improvements and reforms in the civil service that can lead to better working conditions for the staff, but more importantly, better services being delivered to the public. You know, I think that today's event we're particularly targeting public sector bodies today. So many of you will be from around either the central government and some of you from local government, and you may have ideas about reforms or changes that you'd like to make, and perhaps there's some aspect that you need some help with. Perhaps you need a consultancy report, perhaps you need technical help to develop something, perhaps you need the experience of somebody who's worked on a similar project in another area, and you're a few €100,000 away from completing that. And this is your opportunity to get that boost up to be able to make a big change in your working environment. So with us today is Natalie Berger, and we also have other DG Reform representatives, and they're going to give a brief overview of the newly announced EU flagship projects, and these cover digital and green and other priority areas. We're going to hear from Philip Newsom, and Philip Newsom works in one of my departments, in the Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment, and we're going to hear from Philip because he has previously applied for funding. He has gone through the project, and he's going to share his experience, his direct experience with you of what it's like on that side of it, on the side that you're on, going through the process of applying for money and getting it. We're going to have some Q&A afterwards on the TSI, and you can do that through the chat function, and this will be moderated by staff from DG Reform, Alistair McIver, who's the country liaison manager. So what's Ireland's relationship with this TSI funding? So we have been successful over the last number of years in receiving funding for national priority reform projects. Now, I understand that these are typically around sort of €500,000 mark is the amount of money that's on average, and I think there were roughly 10 projects that were approved in the last year. We had 29 applications last year from public bodies, and they were seeking support of €11.5 million. So we got applications from many different government departments, including DEPR and Finance, Health, Justice, OGCIO, Department of Children, Local Government, Transport, OPW, Teaching Council, Central Bank, Housing, and Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, and DFA. So the Commission's final selection of projects for Ireland under the TSI funding 2021 ended up being 4.1 million allocated on 10 projects. Yeah, that's right. So since 2018, we've had 33 projects have been funded for a total of 11.5 million euros. So there's a good deal of experience in the Reform Department in DEPR under Fiona's management, which can help you to advise you on how to get that funding and how to administer it. So I'm really happy to welcome 13 flagship projects that were announced by the Commission this year, and they're under the themes of digital and green transition. And so we're going to go into these in more detail, but from my perspective, innovation in digital technology has proven itself to be immensely helpful in tackling COVID-19. And I'll give you some direct examples of that. Robotic process automation is a method for automating common tasks in administration, and it can be you can script robotic automation. You can automate a process even if you're not a programmer. So in other words, it will record the type of tasks you're doing, and then it can take the more boring and mundane aspects of a job. It can automate those so that you're automatically filtering emails or automatically filing or storing things or filling in forms, and give you, the worker, more time to do more productive and interesting things. And meanwhile, the tasks that are being done by the robot are more accurately done, more reliable. And so to give you an example of that, one of the automations that was done last year was for the HSE. The HSE was hiring a lot of new staff, and they had a lot of Garda vetting applications and a lot of volunteers. So they automated the Garda vetting application process, which made the whole process more feasible. And in another very high-profile case, the Health Protection Surveillance Centre needed help in processing COVID tests, in the administration of positive COVID tests. And by bringing in robotic process automation, they managed to save 60,000 hours of medical scientists' time. And all of that time was critical because you can remember there was a massive policy focus on trying to increase the number of tests that could be carried out. And now I think we're hitting 150,000 or 180,000 tests a week. So we want to help you, and that is our role in this department and under Fiona's team. We have a National Coordination Authority team for TSI, which is led by Fiona, and they're more than happy to engage with any public service body that is interested in applying for support under this mechanism. So they'll offer you advice, and they will put you in touch with the right people in the Commission. I need to remind you that the closing date, the deadline, is Friday the 8th of October. So that's what you're looking towards. And I want to thank the DG Reform team for providing support here, for coming here today. And I want to thank Fiona and her team for organising this. And I want to wish you the best of luck in your funding applications. And I hope that your vision becomes a reality. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Minister, for that. And so I'm going to hand over to the DG Director, to Natalie Berger, at this stage. Many thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Dear Minister of State, dear representatives from across many Irish government departments and authorities, Marginois, good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here with you virtually in Ireland this morning, to have the opportunity to address you today at this important information session on the technical support instrument. And I very much hope that maybe next year we will have the possibility to meet in person. Since 2017, the European Commission has provided expertise to help design over 1,000 reform projects in 27 member states. This includes 35 projects in Ireland, of which 11 were selected for funding under our general round for 2021. I am very pleased because we have enjoyed a most fruitful collaboration with Ireland since 2018, and several of our joint initiatives have already come to a successful conclusion. We have cooperated, for instance, in identifying and prioritizing a reform on an authorization and supervision manual for Central Securities Depository. Knowing how important a financial center Ireland is, this, I think, is a very meaningful project. And we achieved this by working closely with colleagues in the Department of Finance and the Central Bank of Ireland, and an expert team that was mobilized to formulate policy reform recommendations. And I want to salute and thank all colleagues who have participated in this very important project. Another example of successful cooperation is linked to the reform on the establishment of a modern regulatory authority for all gambling activities licensed in Ireland. I'm very pleased to see that these reforms on both these fronts are moving forward, and that the technical support we have provided has been put to effective use. As of this year, the technical support instrument continues to support reforms with an emphasis on the green and digital transitions, and of course, a relation with the recovery and national recovery and resilience plans. We're having a great success story here together and in reform. But this is even more a success story for the member states, as without your commitment and your imagination to design high quality requests, our work would not be possible. By presenting high quality requests, you are helping us to help you well. And over the years, we have learned and improved and deepened and widened our offer. Today, we do not only wait for requests coming from individual member states, but we also designed what we call flagship projects to facilitate the work of the member states in preparing and presenting the projects. Of course, presenting or joining a flagship is by no means any type of obligation. There is no reserved budget, there is no priority. We just try to streamline the efforts in view of the ever-growing and ever-increasing requests that we receive from member states. You know that the process is extremely competitive. For 2021, we received more than 700 requests, and we have been able to support 226 requests, and then we issued a dedicated call linked to the implementation, the finalization and the implementation of the recovery and resilience plans, and we could accept 20 more projects. But of course, there is a limit in the number of projects that we take, and for us to be able to take good decisions and to support the right projects, quality matters a lot. We will hear a little bit more about the flagship projects in a presentation made by colleagues later today. But in a nutshell, the idea with these flagship projects is to create projects which are relevant for many, potentially even all member states, and which address European priorities, of course, building based on the needs that have been expressed by the member states. And the flagship projects are an efficient way for member states to receive technical support, as in the context of a flagship project, there is no need for developing all the requests on your own. And in practice, the flagships propose some solutions to common challenges that we have identified. I said it before, on the basis of the needs expressed by the member states and on the basis of our experience. And the flagships can, of course, be adapted to each specific member state's need. So joining a flagship does not mean that the technical support provided by DG Reform is not going to be bespoke or tailor-made. We can very well combine the two. And beside the flagship projects, of which we anticipate that many will become multi-country projects, we of course continue to try to combine member states' individual requests to multi-country projects as well, where relevant. We strongly believe that this way of fostering mutual cooperation beyond borders is a unique selling proposition for what we do, as every member state has strengths which others can benefit from. In addition to these projects, we are supporting member states in addressing the huge challenge of rebuilding our economies in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. Fortunately for Ireland, I understand, according to the European Commission's economic forecast, the situation looks much better than in other member states from an economic point of view. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a major impact on Ireland, but less severe in terms of output and jobs than in many other member states. There was a fall in the growth rate in 2020 of seems 3.4%, but the economy is expected to recover robustly, to grow of at least 7.2 and 5.1% respectively in 2021 and 2022 on the back of a swiftly recovering domestic demand. We understand that there is, like in many other member states, going to be, or that we are expecting, a rise in unemployment, but even though employment growth is likely to remain more severely affected in sectors that were more exposed to the crisis, we can see the path to a recovery. The government finances, like elsewhere, have been negatively affected by the crisis, But there again, we believe that with the ambitious recovery plan and with the right reforms, we will get to an increase in the growth. Unfortunately, the COVID is not the only challenge, and maybe not even the most difficult and the most impactful that we are facing today. The climate emergency is still there, which is why we need to rebuild our economies in a green and sustainable way. In addition, we all know that the future is increasingly digital, and to remain successful in this digital future, we have to focus our efforts in the area of the digital transition. So it is only logical that many member states, or that member states, have been asked to submit their recovery and resilience plans with a focus on these two areas, on the green and on the digital. On the 8th of September, Wednesday last week, I was delighted to see the adoption of Ireland's recovery and resilience plan by the Council, with a strong commitment to both the green and the digital transition. In our proposal to the Council, the Commission services welcomed the strong green dimension included in the Irish plan. The Commission's assessment found that Ireland's plan devotes 42% of the plan's total allocation to measures that support the climate objectives. And this by far outperforms the RRF green spending target of 37%. This includes measures supporting energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, biodiversity, and ecosystem. The reforms and the investments under the Irish Recovery and Resilience Plan will contribute to the government's major policy objective of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. And this objective is soon to be placed on legal footing as part of the RRP implementation in the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Bill 2021, in line with the European Green Deal. This is something that we very, very much welcome. In addition, the Irish Recovery and Resilience Plan focuses 32% of its total allocation on measures that support the digital transition, including measures to enhance connectivity, support the digitalization of the public administration and of enterprises, and contribute to the upskilling in the educational system. The technical support instruments, and I should say DG Reform, all colleagues who are on the call and even beyond, stand ready to provide technical support for the design and implementation of the reforms that you have included in your recovery and resilience plan, in a complementary manner to the funding provided through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Naturally, we will need to be mindful to avoid overlaps and double funding, but your own reform plan will provide an important strategic context for prioritizing the technical support available through complementary Commission instruments, such as the Technical Support Instrument. Indeed, DG Reform is already playing a key role in assisting with the implementation of the RRP in Ireland. In June, we organized a dedicated call to provide support to the Member States for the general implementation of the Recovery and Resilience plans. And in this context, we are delighted to be working with the RRP implementing body within the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform to establish a monitoring, reporting, audit and control system for the RRP through an ambitious project that will be launched in the upcoming weeks. And I wish to warmly greet all the colleagues from this department. In view of the upcoming TSI 2022 call, I can only strongly recommend that you share your request and even only ideas early on to us so we can provide feedback and possibly assistance in developing the request. Experience has shown that an early involvement on our side can benefit requests, and it does increase the chances for the projects to be selected for support. As the Minister of State has just recalled it, the internal deadline to send requests to the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform is on the 8th of October, with our DG Reform deadline itself falling on the 31st of October. I would also like to encourage you not only to benefit from technical support, but also to provide it where possible, because Ireland has already been active in providing support in domains such as innovation, community policing, cybercrime, reform of revenue administration, etc., etc. And this support has been tremendously appreciated and useful for the other member states. As you know, we are supporting the exchange of good practices among member states with our TAIEX instrument, which allows us to cover the cost of visits of experts from the European public administration in support of their peers in other member states. There is no doubt that many member states have a lot to learn from Ireland on the functioning of the public administration. And we witness this both through the projects that we have supported in Ireland over the past years, as well as in cooperation we've had with Irish authorities in providing technical support to other member states. We see that there is a consistent interest from other member states' authorities to cooperate with authorities in Ireland in a targeted manner as peers and experts through the TAIEX instrument, but also in longer term as reform partners in implementation of an entire project. This is something we would be pleased to explore further, and I continue benefiting from the great support of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform for facilitating contacts with the community of the Irish experts. With that, let me thank you for your interest in our work and the good cooperation among your authorities with DG Reform in the past and certainly in the future as well. Together with my colleagues, we are available to support you throughout the process of preparing the specific requests, and today we are here to answer all the burning questions you might have but never dared to ask. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Natalie, for your remarks there. And I think especially in terms of early engagement with potential projects, etc. So just to move on, we're now going to have a practical guide to TSI, which is going to be delivered by Lara Rinaldi. And if Lara is there, we will pass over presentation rights to you. Thanks again, Natalie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Rinaldi, Head of the Financial Sector and Access to Finance Unit of DG Reform. I'm going now to share my presentation with you. I hope everything goes well. Just a second. I hope you can see it. Okay. Can you see it? Can you all see it well?
Yes, Lara, thank you.
Okay, very good. So after the introduction of Nathalie and of the Minister of State, I will now guide you through more the practical aspects of the technical support program and how to submit requests for the coming round for 2022. So okay, so we will discuss. I will discuss briefly what the technical support instrument is, because I guess many of you already know it very well, but for others it might be still relatively new. And I will also go a bit deeper in referring to the multi-country projects and the flagship projects that Mrs. Berger already highlighted. So I will explain a bit more in detail what they are, and then finally we will go through the practical steps to submit your requests to us for the coming round. So just to start by using the words of our commissioner, Elisa Ferreira, the technical support instrument is a powerful tool that can enable member states to carry out reforms and reach sustainable growth. So that's indeed really what we try to do every day with our team of experts in all the different policy areas. And in practice, the way we do this is by providing tailor-made expertise to the member states to both design and implement reforms. And this tailor-made support is driven by your own demand, by the demand of the member states. So we really want to answer to your needs, and we only provide expertise and not financing. So there is no co-financing needs on the side of the member states. We manage entirely the financial process and the contracting, which is also a great advantage for the member states. The technical support instrument is also an important pillar of the European Recovery Plan, because we also have a mission to help the member states through the technical support instruments to implement their recovery and resilience plans, and therefore with the objective of mitigating the economic and social consequences of the COVID crisis. What is the technical support instrument? This is a relatively new instrument that we have from beginning of this year, but the technical support that it provides is not new. It's the technical support instrument is actually mirroring the tool we had before, that was the structural reform support instrument, and the structural reform support program, sorry, which was covering the period from 2017 until 2020, under which we have already worked together with Ireland on many projects. So the technical support instrument is meant to continue, to allow us to continue this mission, and is covering the period of 2021-2027, with an increased budget, however, with respect to the previous program. So for those years, we have a total of 864 million available to provide support to member states. Clearly, we work with all of the 27 member states in all policy areas, and also for the different phases of the reform where you might need help, being the design, the implementation, or even the ex-post evaluation. The reform area that we cover, as I mentioned, we cover all policy areas, but of course we need to frame them and categorize them for practical needs. So the first two I would like to highlight are the green transition and the digital transition, because these are also the twin priorities of the Commission. Of course, we all know very well the importance of those two aspects, so we are clearly active on those. Health and long-term care, of course, is an area that we also cover, and it's of primary relevance in these times. But then we also cover education, training, skills, governance and social services as well, governance and public administration, competitiveness, financial sector and access to finance, revenue administration and public financial management, and labor markets and social protection. So this is how internally we divide the different area of interventions. Now, there are several steps in the process for participating to the technical support instrument. The first one, the first practical step is the submission of requests by the member states, by the beneficiaries in the member states, after which DG Reform performs a selection of the requests based on the priorities defined by our regulation, and then we accompany the beneficiaries in the member states in the provision of technical support. We will go through these in detail later on. Now I would rather give you an overview of how the technical support works. As I mentioned at the beginning, we provide expertise, tailor-made expertise to the member states, and we can do this in different ways. The first way we do that is by providing expertise from our own resources, from staff from the European Commission, or we can also provide it indirectly by partnering with international organizations, by mobilizing member states from experts, from other member states, from the administrations of other member states, and also experts from the private sector. And as already mentioned, our colleagues, our policy officers, are involved throughout all the phases of the project. So from before you apply for a request of support, by sending us draft requests, we will give you feedback on that, and then through the whole selection process, and then the implementation until the completion of the project on the ground. To give you a bit of an overview of the past work, on the left-hand side panel, you can see the number of requests that we have been receiving from all the member states from 2017, when we had our first SRSP round, until the TSI 2021 round. This is the blue bars, and then the yellow bars are the requests that we could select. As Nathalie was already mentioning, we have to be selective, obviously, in the requests that we select, because our resources, both human and financial, are limited. So the quality of the request is very important. And as you can see from in the bottom, from the rate of number of accepted requests, these have been increasing a bit over time, because the popularity of the instrument is becoming bigger. So the member states now know us and know the benefit of working with us, but we have limited capacity. So it's very important to make requests that are of good quality to have higher chances. On the right-hand side panel, you can see the distribution of requests that were selected in the last round from beginning of this year across policy areas. The red one, the 23%, that I think is not mentioned in the table, is related to sustainable growth and business development activities. And for all the others, you have on the side the part for labor market, revenue administration, financial sector, and governance and public administration. These are instead, so what I showed before was a picture for all the member states. Now this is a picture for Ireland. So this shows the technical support projects that were accepted for Ireland from 2000, in the years from 2018 until 2021. We started with 5 projects the first year, and then we had a big increase in the next year for a total of 35 projects across the years. And this is how those projects are distributed across policy areas on the left-hand side panel. And what is the status on the right-hand side panel? As you can see here on this latter one, 14 projects are currently on the ground, and 7 are being prepared to be on the ground. So they are probably in the contracting phase, being from the last selection round. And 10 are actually completed, so closed and in evaluation phase. The evaluation phase is after the completion. We always send to the member states and the different participants in the projects some questionnaires to make an assessment and to receive feedback on how the project went and to what extent it achieved the initial results. Now, this year, beside the regular technical support instrument round that we carried out at the end of last year, we also had a dedicated call on the recovery and resilience plans. And this is because at the time of the regular round, many member states had their recovery plans still in draft form, and the needs related to them were not fully clear. So for this reason, before the summer, we have done a dedicated call, just requesting requests to that are in support of the implementation of the national plans. So we have allocated a 9 million budget for this, and we received 38 requests from all member states. One request was from Ireland that was selected, so it's one of the 23 that was selected. And so that's it regarding the past. Now let's talk about the coming round, the TSI 2022 round. As mentioned already by Natalie, this year we want to put a particular focus on multi-country or multi-region or multi-institution requests. This is not something new. We have been dealing with these projects and promoting those type of projects in the past as well, but we would like to do this even more. Why? Because we really see that there is a great benefit on having member states working together on common issues, and sometimes not even different member states, but it can also be different institutions or ministries within the same country deciding to team up together and make a joint request. If we receive in the past, what we have been doing is also that we were receiving similar ideas from different countries or different institutions, and then we would ourselves propose it to the member states to develop them as joint initiatives. This works well, but we really would like to promote on your side to try to do this step and see where there can be common needs and relevant needs to be addressed across member states, because this allows to have peer learning, to learn from experience of others, and then of course it can have in the end a bigger impact. It might require some coordination effort, we realize, but the experience so far on our side is that those projects are very, very successful and also have a high implementation rate. While the flagship, so the multi-country projects, as I said, it's something we want to further promote, but we were already doing them before. While the flagship technical support projects are really a novelty of this year. What are these flagships? It was mentioned briefly by Natalie, so I will a bit repeat and then give you an overview of what they are exactly. So these are projects that we propose actively to the member states because we have noted that there are common needs across member states on those areas, and they're also in line with the European and Commission priorities. So what we want to do is to facilitate, if you want, access to those projects for the member states. And that is also, they are based on a separate template, because the template for requests is partially pre-filled for them. So to even ease from a practical point of view, the submission of those projects, but obviously they remain voluntary. There is no obligation whatsoever for the member states to apply to them. And also it is, I would like to clarify once more that so you might want to take up those projects, but you are very much welcome to continue submitting your requests coming from your own priorities, as it was the case before. So we don't want to discourage that, but we simply want to facilitate the process and also to allow to have member states working together, because many of those flagships will actually allow the member states to team up and to work together on topics that are relevant for all of them. I think this is already covered, except that the total number of flagships that we are proposing are 13, and these are the topics. They are organized across the two priorities of the Commission, the digital and the green priority, and then there are a number, so this is the blue and green titles, and then there is a number of them that is covering different other priorities, which however are commonly relevant for the various member states. So for the digital area, so to answer the needs for further digitalization, what we have is on the financial sector, we want to create a supervisory academy to strengthen the capacity of competent authorities in the financial sector to deal with innovative digital finance. We also have digital skills for digital transformation of health and care system. And we also have development of resilient, innovative, and user-centric digital government services. Now moving on to the green related ones, we have one on bridging the climate financing gap, one on recharge and refuel to promote urban mobility, support for the renovation wave, for the renovation of buildings, one on green taxes, focusing on applying the polluter pays principle, and one on the implementation of the just transition, which is similar to a joint project that we had proposed last year, but follows up on the next step for the implementation of the joint transition. And then the other priorities that are not related to the other flagships that are not related to either green or digital priorities are on supporting the tourism ecosystem in the member states, one on the integration of nationals from third countries, on the European Child Guarantee, on gender mainstreaming in public policy and the budgeting process of the member states, and finally, one focusing on regional and local authorities to facilitate cooperation from the local to the central level. So these are the flagship projects. For those ones, there are simplified templates. So we will see later on and going through the practicalities of submitting requests. There are templates that are partially pre-filled for those requests related to flagships. I invite you, depending on your interest, to read them, to read the description that we have, the more detailed description that we have on our website for those flagships, and also look at the templates to have a better idea whether this can be something interesting for you. Now, going back to the process of submitting requests for technical support, this is the calendar of the preparation for the TSI 2022 round. We started in June with the annual conference, where we also presented more in detail each one of those flagship projects. And then now we are in the phase where we are actively engaging with all the member states and also asking for their ideas and their draft requests to be able to give you feedback on an early stage. As mentioned before, our experience is that this is very, very important to improve the quality of the request, and therefore to have bigger chances of success. So we are now in the middle of this preparation, and the deadline for submission of requests on our side, the official deadline is the 31st of October, but as already mentioned by the Minister of State, the internal deadline in Ireland is the 8th of October. So it's very important for you to stick to this 8th of October because the National Coordinating Authority needs time to organize and screen the different requests. This is just to give you an overview of what is included in the request that you have to fill in to apply for technical support. There are several fields. For those of you who have already submitted in the past, the template is practically the same, but with some additional elements or additional explanations. As you can see from this slide, there is a section 0 on multi-country requests to clarify, to have a clear understanding, especially on our side, whether this was discussed already with other member states or not. And then in section 2, which is very, very important because it's the section where you are supposed to describe what is it in practice that you would like to have as support. We have added here and there a few elements to really clarify, to guide you through what we really need to understand, in particular on what would you see as concrete outputs from the support, and also on the budget and the resources that would be needed to deliver such outputs. And then still on section 2, there is a new question on highlighting the main results from past projects and how this request is linked to past implementation of support projects. Also on identification of stakeholders. This is also very important from our experience to identify at an early stage who might be all the relevant stakeholders of a given initiative so that they can be on board from the beginning, and also to include more details on the envisaged provider. This is the template for the flagship projects. As I mentioned already, there is a separate template for it, and when you go to the website to submit a request, you will have to select whether you want to submit a request for a flagship project or you want to go for the standard template, because for the flagship projects there is a dedicated template for each one of the 13th that we propose, where a number of sections are already filled in, so the job goes much faster for you. You only have to fill in a few of the sections that remain empty. This is how the website looks on our website looks for submitting the request. So here the presentation will be shared as well, and it will include links to the platform for submission of the request, so they need to be submitted online. And the beneficiary authorities or the coordinating authorities, depending on how this is organized locally, need to get a EU login account to be able to submit the request. So this will require not coming very last minute for the submission, because you have to get the login first. But I'm sure that the coordinating authority is already familiar with this process, and my colleague Alistair also is always available to help you throughout the process in the coming weeks. Here now we are talking really about the practical steps for the submission of requests. But again, I would like to highlight once more, as already done by Nathalie, that we would really encourage you to submit draft requests to us in advance of the official submission. Our experts are very much available to hear your ideas for support, to help you to improve them if needed. So we would really encourage you to reach out to us, to the different teams in the G reform for for an early chat before submitting your requests. And this is what I have already explained. Going back to the platform, when you come to the platform, you have to select whether you go for a normal request, so the standard one where you have to fill in all the fields, or you go for one of the 13 flagships. So here we come more or less to the end. After having dealt with the submission of the request, which is the important part for you to understand today. After this phase, which concludes on 31st of October, we have the two following phases that are the selection of the request and the provision of technical support on the ground. This is the timeline after October. So in the period between of November and December, we will perform our assessment of all the requests received, and we will make a preliminary selection at the very end of the year, which will be communicated at the beginning of January to the member states. And after that, we move on with the design of the selected requests and start getting on the ground, starting more or less from April, after the formal decision on the selection of the request is done by the Commission early March. So that's a bit the process and the timing. I will not go through the following slides, but they will be available. They will be made available to you. You have all the links to reach out to our colleagues from the different policy areas, so that you can talk to the experts depending on what are your areas of interest. And you also have links to our website where you find really a lot of information on past projects or ongoing projects that we have been doing in the different policy areas in other countries that can really serve you as a source of inspiration. So I would suggest you to go through it, because I'm sure it can help you guiding you through the request. And again, very happy to receive your idea and to have a discussion with you at expert level to help you throughout the submission process. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for the attention. And if you have any questions as well, I will be available later on for questions on all of these, and also on topics related to the financial sector, which is the one I'm leading. Thank you very much.
That's great, Laura. Thanks very much. It was very interesting and a lot of information there for us. I noticed there's a number of questions coming in as well, and what we'll do is hold those until the end of the sessions, because some questions may be answered at that stage. So again, thanks to Laura for that. And now I'm going to hand over to one of our colleagues from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, to Philip Newsom, who is a recipient of some TSI funding. So I'll hand over to you now. Thanks, Philip.
Sorry, Fiona, I'm just attempting to share my screen.
Starting to share now, I think, Philip. We have it there. Just put it on the slideshow. Yeah. Brilliant.
See that? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to present on our recent project funded under the Structural Reform Support Service, and thank you for the previous speakers for the very useful information. I'm going to give a brief overview of a project that we, Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, are working on at the moment with DG Reform on supporting our renewable energy targets in the electricity sector. Give a brief context, I suppose, is that Ireland is a very high ambitions in decarbonizing our electricity grid. and we have a target of meeting at least 70% of our electricity demand from energy sources by 2030. This is, I suppose, the theme of the support that we're currently receiving from DG Reform is to bolster our department's capacity and analytical ability to deliver on that target. It's a target that's very much in line with I would say, the European climate policy agenda, the Green Deal, the Fit for 55 package, and the wider green transition, I think that Natalie had mentioned earlier there as well. Support kicked off in Q4 last year after we'd gone through the process of application and being successful, and is due to conclude by the end of this year. There's 5 deliverables that are being provided through external contractor to, again, work with officials in our department and relevant agencies to look at what problems we need to solve from a policy perspective, bolster our analytical capacity and our policy development capacity. The core contractor provider that's working with us on those 5 deliverables has been that core piece of work has been supplemented by 2 TSI events, one of which we held in summer, and one of which is due to be held the next month. That brought together experts. Unfortunately, it was virtual, let's say, but I know usually these events are either study visits or they're experts that come over to the member state. But even though it was virtual, it was actually a very successful and useful event, and I think that's probably one of the key learnings for us from this project, is integrating the IX event into the support from the provider. Just with that, I won't go too much into the detail, conscious of time, but just to give a very broad overview of the deliverables that come under the project. Set out the sort of 5 core deliverables here on the left and the objectives. So it's really, this is important, I think, for those maybe applying for support under the TSI, that to be really clear what the deliverable is and what the objective is. So in our case, we start off with an inception report on the overall objective of the support, and then we go into the more specific. So this was around developing an impact assessment methodology tool that we could use to support our decision making on which technologies, which renewable energy technologies need policy support, need funding. Other areas included support for communities and citizens, developing our offshore wind framework, and then specific deliverable around energy storage. So all of these were broken down and set out with very clear objectives and brought together in a final report at the end. As I say, we're midway through the support, but we have there is kind of, I suppose, kind of tangible outcomes and that we have received, and that we are, I think, very pleased with progress to date. Looking at a number of the impact assessment tool I mentioned earlier has been developed by the consultants to aid officials in the department or in our agencies to assess the financing, the economic costs and benefits of policy support for various technologies. And this is something that we really hope to integrate into our decision-making process. So a lot of work has gone into that, and it's I think a very useful tool for us. It was something that was actually suggested to us, I would say, by DG Reform in our development at the early stage of this, and it's turned out to be one of the most useful aspects of this. Other aspects are around, as I say, developing a pathway scenarios for our renewable energy trajectory, carbon decarbonization out to 2030 and 2040. Really useful for us, particularly at the moment. We're in the middle of finalizing our next climate action plan, and I know there's a lot of simultaneous work going on at EU level on this with the Fit for 55 package and the wider EU Green Deal. So this is very much linked into that. Similarly, work on renewable energy community investments and how to get citizens more involved in supporting renewable energy projects and the green transition. That was a very specific deliverable in this piece of work, but it's very important, and it very much tied in with the wider engagement piece around the green transition. So they're the key, I suppose, highlights of what we've achieved to date. I might just add, one of the value adds was definitely the international country reviews that the provider did. They were able to tap into their networks around Europe and look at what other countries are doing in this area, and that was then, as I say, complemented by the TIEX events that we had earlier in the year. Key learnings. I think this has been, as I said already, around early engagement with DG reform officials, and I'd say that the most important thing is identifying the problem that you're trying to solve with the support. It's very easy to have a general idea of what you want and maybe the kind of objectives, but really pinning that down, trying to be really specific with the outcomes, with the deliverables, how you're going to use the support, how it then feeds into policies of your institution, local authority, department, whatever it is. So I think thinking, really forcing yourself to think what is the problem that the support will help address. Focusing then on the EU perspective, tying it into the EU agenda, as in our case, it's the EU Green Deal, national policies like the Climate Action Plan, and then local, whatever the local particular issues are that you're trying to address is also really important. Again, in our case, it was about citizen and community buy-in to renewable energy. Engagement with DG reform is really critical and really useful. The officials we dealt with and in DG reform are very helpful in helping us shape the actual application, and then once you are successful in the process, then actually specifying exactly what it is that you want support for is hugely important. So having that clear idea early on, and then taking on board the advice from DG reform is very helpful in finalizing your application. I'd say the other couple of points is just making sure that you as a body, as an authority are geared up to engage with the project, that officials have time and availability, and if external agencies or other bodies are required or dependencies on the project, then to make sure they're aware of that and they're brought into that process. So in our case, we had our Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, for example, was carried out some of the modelling required, some of the economic modelling. So they were at an early stage brought into the project. So I think just making sure, putting it into your business plans or whatever, that this piece of work is being undertaken and that you've made space and you've made time for that, because that's absolutely necessary to achieve the goals. Again, just to finish up, I suppose on the TIEX event, I think that's a really valuable process, and I just wouldn't underestimate how useful it is. And finally, then just I suppose engagement again with the DG Reform, and if it's a provider that you have is critical to keeping the project on track. So just encourage anyone who's goes through this process successful that, you know, to put the time into the regular meetings. We have monthly meetings with DG Reform and our provider to make sure that the project is successful. So I think from our perspective, we're probably 2/3 of the way through this. We're very happy with it. It's been a huge benefit to our department, and really hope it will feed into our various policies in the renewable energy sector. Just like to say finally, thank you to DG Reform and particularly Ivana, who's our policy officer in DG Reform, who's worked tirelessly with us on the process, and to Fiona and colleagues as well for the opportunity. And happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.
That's great, Philip. Thanks so much for that. And it's really interesting to get, you know, all the guide, if you like, from somebody on the ground in terms that's gone through and been in receipt of the funding from the TSI. I'm conscious, everybody, that we're slightly running over a bit on timings, but we're going to continue on. And as I said at the beginning, we're recording the session today and we will be sending out the links. So if people need to leave earlier, they will have access to the recording for it. So as we mentioned earlier, we talked about the 13 flagship projects representing the top priorities under the broad themes of green, digital and other priorities. And we're lucky to have Mina, Roman and Louise here from DG Reform, who are going to give us a brief overview of under the thematic sides, if you like, for the 3 of the flagship projects. So I think Mina's going to kick us off in terms of that. So we'll just hand over the presentation to her so she can share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. If you allow me, I understand that we are indeed behind with the timing. I would like to start very shortly with the presentation of the topics that our unit covers. We're specifically focusing on public administration. While this is not a policy priority per se for the Commission, there is a very strong understanding within our DG, but also in other Commission services, that the quality and the operation of public administrations is critical, not only for reforms, but in general for policy implementation and delivering to the needs of the citizens. So that's why our unit is focusing on all cross-cutting measures linked to the performance and efficiency of public administrations, and we put more specific focus on digitalization of public administration, the quality and effectiveness of national judicial systems, but also transparency and accountability, professionalism, and another thing that pops up quite frequently is the capacity to manage EU funds. Now, moving to the flagship on regional and local administration, the rationale behind that one is that while there has been quite a lot of reform activity in public administration across Europe in the past decades, usually there is a strong focus on central, but not so much at regional and local. These levels still stay behind. And one of the critical issues are indeed how they collaborate with the central level, how they collaborate between themselves. Even more so, regional and local administrations are central for translating national and EU priorities into specific measures, projects, investments at local level. They have a critical role in digital transition, the climate agenda, but also social and economic development. And they also are the front line of providing civil services to citizens. So that all of that makes a very strong need to focus on their capacity, but also how they work within the administrative system. So the intention of that flagship is to focus indeed on all these issues. So we want to improve not only capacity at local and regional level, but to see how they collaborate with between themselves with central level, and how what are the opportunities to improve effectiveness across all tiers of government. Now, the actions that we have identified for this flagship cover review of the functions, that is the allocation of functions across the different tiers of government, that could be in general for general policy making, but it could also cover a specific sectoral issue. Another element that we also foresee is the review of the processes, so how the different tiers work together. And there is another element which is quite interesting. It could be a specific element within the in combination with the other two activities, or it could be a standalone, developing capacity for strategic foresight. And there we focus specifically on capabilities for data collection, processing, analytical capacities, and training. And the activities that we foresee that you will see in the pre-filled template for this flagship include functional mapping, process mapping, the foresight action, and then we come up with a report on recommendations on which the country should act, or will develop specific reform actions afterwards. Of course, this could be tailored to the needs of a specific country. We could add additional actions depending on the needs and the specific ideas behind. So I'll stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up later on this flagship. Thank you.
That's great, Mina. Thank you very much for that. And I am now going to move on and pass over to Roman again, if Roman is there. Thanks.
Yeah. Mina. Okay, wait. I'll try to share my screen. Are you able to see it?
Can just see it coming up now, Roman, if you could just maximize it.
Yeah, okay. Wait.
Thank you.
Are you able to see it, or is it still there? Okay, wait. I'll maximize the application presentation. So now it's okay.
That's very
okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks. So my name is Roman Diaz Gonzalez. I'm working with Mina in B2, in Digireform B2, and I'm responsible for the digital projects in the areas of e-government and digital public administration. Okay, in brief, I'll introduce you the flagship for the e-government services. And only a couple of words about what is the intention of the flagship. Following the metaphor of the flagship, leading a fleet of boats, what we intend with this flagship is to make the same effect, to stay at the level that it could spark, it could trigger a lot of projects in its wake. So for the e-government services, we'll stay at the level of the strategy, at the level of the action plans, roadmaps, etc., that could afterwards driven the implementation of the projects included in this strategy or triggered by this strategy. So that's the first thing to comment on. And so I'll move directly to the areas of this flagship that could be of interest for you. So the first one is e-governance. Okay, governance is paramount for any activity, human activity, but e-governance is particularly important because now for the digital transformation of our administration, we need a strong governance, a strong strategical view on the whole organization, and to have a good organization of the way we are working to produce the changes we intend. So the second area module is the data governance and management. It is paramount as well for governance is at the top of the pyramid, and data governance and management is just below, but it affects the raw material of the administration, that is data. As good the data and the information is, as good your decision, your process should work. So this thing is especially important, or this module is especially important, taking into account the emerging technologies. So if you are planning to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever the technologies under this umbrella of artificial intelligence, under the umbrella of big data, blockchain, augmented reality, whatever you are going to use as emerging technologies or disruptive technologies, you need good data. The third module is the single digital gateway that is in the regulation. So it is especially urgent because we have the deadline of 2023. So if you have initiatives in this area and you need support for them, we should be more than happy to support you. The fourth one is smart cities. Here you can see the link between the green and the digital. In the concept of the smart cities in this area is where the two of them meet together. And the green becomes digital and the digital becomes green. So you can see a lot of initiatives around this concept of smart cities. And they should have a lot of the impulse in the coming years. So we hope or we are expecting some increased demand in this area. The fifth one is the digital regularization. Okay, this is particularly relevant because from the very beginning of the inception, when we start thinking about the legislation, the regulation to be put in place, we don't take into account the opportunities that technology is giving us and the requirements that the technology puts in the way we draft our legislation. It should be difficult afterwards to implement what is driven by the legislation and to support the initiatives that derive from it. So in this area, we are as well happy to support you. And the last one, but as usual is not the least important, is the digital skills for the public sector. In Spain, that is my home country, and I don't know in yours, this is particularly important because if you don't have the right people in the right place in the administration, it should be difficult for you to produce the digital transformation you want for your administration. And this is not only about to have the right people, to have these people good trained and to have a career path, including this upskilling, reskilling, or skilling appropriately for the work they should perform in the future, not only for the work they are performing now. So as a result of all of that, what we expect to have at the end of as the outcome of this flagship are the strategies, roadmaps, and these endorsed by the right administrative bodies, and the change management plans to accompany all the process. And I stop here. Happy to take on board any questions you have.
That's great, Roman. Thank you very much for that. Just to mention that all the slides from today, just talking to Alistair there, will be shared following the session as well, so they'll be available for everybody. And Roman, we will come back to you if we have questions towards the end of the session. I'm now going to hand over to Louise Jensen, talking about greening taxes, applying polluter pays principle in practice. So I'll hand over to Louise at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Louise, and I am from the unit Revenue Administration and Public Financial Management. We cover several areas, but within revenue administration, we are very much focused on tax policy, in particular greening of taxes, tax compliance, aggressive tax planning, tax fraud and evasion. And on the side of public financial management, we focus quite a lot on expenditure policy, budget preparation and implementation, public sector accounting, statistics, but also macro fiscal framework. So we cover quite a lot of areas. Focusing more on this flagship today, that is called Greening Taxes, Applying the Polluters Pay Principle in Practice. The polluter pays principle is very much in the heart of all EU green legislation. The principle aims to ensure that polluting behavior is reduced or fully eliminated, and that polluters compensate the society for the damage they cause. The European Green Deal builds further on the polluters pay principle to ensure that taxation is aligned with climate objectives. In many member states, several instruments in line and trying to make the polluters pay are implemented. However, their share still remains quite minor, and this is why we've launched this flagship. Another thing just to focus on is that there are several gains in adjusting your tax scheme. Besides environmental and health benefits, studies show that there can be overall positive macroeconomic impacts on the economy, in the sense that if you increase or higher environmental taxes, and that revenue is used to reduce labor taxes, it could have positive impacts on growth, employment, real incomes, and GDP. And this flagship is built around a whole portfolio of green tax and market-based instruments that has shown to be very effective in its sense, and effective to reduce air pollution and water pollution, as well as to improve water scarcity, waste, and biodiversity. The overall objective of the flagship is to reduce, as I said, polluting behavior, but we also very much hope to improve or to boost economic growth and resilience to climate shock by broadening the tax base, contribute to the objectives of the European Green Deal in order to become climate neutral by 2050. And to contribute to more accurate, estimated, and target green tax reforms by improving the pricing and modeling instruments around Europe. So, Alistair, could you switch to the next slide? The flagship is built around two phases. The first phase is an introductory phase, where we will have 3 modules on biodiversity, zero pollution, and circular economy. It is meant as a learning phase, but also as a peer sharing. So member states will be grouped in several workshops, and member states can choose to be part of all workshops or just parts of them, or and they can opt in and out as they like. The second phase is a much more tailored phase, where we will focus on the specific needs of each member state, and in this case, Ireland. We have brought up some suggestions of what could be relevant to look at, but I think the overall focus is that we want to be able and to support you in providing policy recommendations on greening taxes, but also to look at what is the environmental, the social, and the economic impacts of it. Therefore, our suggestions would be to have some kind of status play assessment, and then build capacity in measures and in their impacts by introducing pricing instruments, economic models, and then having policy recommendations and action plans. It's important to mention that that this is only suggestions. So we are open for a lot of different kind of measures, and member states can opt in and out on the measures they think are relevant. So if you are already very advanced in the economic modeling and might not be that interested in developing that part, we could focus more on policy recommendations. So it's very much adaptable. And then just in the end to add, we are very open to have any bilateral discussions. So please do reach out to Alistair, and he can forward in contacts. We are here to support you if needed. Thank you.
That's great, Louise. Thank you very much for that, and many thanks to Mina, to Roman, and yourself in terms of covering off what's really interesting in terms of the flagship projects. At this stage, I know that people maybe after today's session will have more questions and answers as well, and we will give you an email address at the end so you can send any queries to us, and we'll obviously try and answer the queries, or in conjunction with the representatives from DG Reform as well. But on this note, I'm going to hand you over now to Alistair McIver, and Alistair is our country coordinator for Ireland in terms of the TSI. So I'll hand you over to Alistair now. Thank you.
Yes, hello everybody. I'll just go through some of the questions that have come up in the chat box and try to provide a little bit of guidance. So the first one of those is from Michelle Rooney of Pobol, and her question is to do with the involvement of government departments in the procurement process, or whether that process is led by the Commission. I mean, I think there's one part of the procurement process, I mean, the actual formal evaluation, which for legal reasons has to be performed by the Commission itself, but the member state colleagues, yourselves from the government departments, will be very involved. I mean, firstly in deciding how we deliver a project. Will it be in a particular kind of procurement contract? Will it be with a grant? Will it be with another international organization? Will it be in an exchange with other public services in other member states? And then if we do elect to deliver the project through procurement, you as a government department, as the beneficiary, will be involved in drawing up the terms of reference for that project. You'll be involved in, or I mean, you yourself will guide and be the primary drafter for the work plan and the focus of the reform. And then you'll be involved also in managing and in approving deliverables. We don't approve deliverables or indeed the terms of reference without yourselves. It's very much the idea is really very much to ensure the ownership of the project is with the government department itself. In terms of the expenditure of the TSI, whether it should be purely, it's purely on consultant fees, or if it can be equipment or non-personnel budget lines. In principle, we don't. So what we don't provide is financial support itself. So we wouldn't be financing personnel places per se. What we finance is the support. So the fees that would go to a consultant or to a public provider in the case of an international organization, or in the form of a grant, perhaps to a university. That's what we would finance. So equipment and financial support per se would be outside the scope of the TSI. But that said, we can help you in managing and targeting financial support, and there are numerous examples of us doing that with managing structural funds, with the Just Transition Fund. So that's something we have a lot of experience with, and it's something we can certainly help with. In terms of whether the consultants engaged have to be international, or we can engage expertise within Ireland, there are a couple of examples of us, or prominent examples of us engaging expertise within Ireland. The case of a new framework for a gambling regulator, the support there that we engaged was with McCann Fitzgerald solicitors. And another example is on a framework for Brexit freight and transport support. There we undertook a project with the Technical University of Dublin through a grant. So there's certainly space for Irish consultants to be involved, and for Irish expertise to be shared. And as our director was pointing out in her presentation, I mean, other member states have also benefited from Irish expertise, so it makes sense that Ireland itself gets to benefit from Irish expertise that's right here. Then there were a couple of questions from Declan McCormack. If there are previous examples of application forms on the website, that itself isn't there. But what we would do instead is we would be able to help you draw up the application forms based on our previous experience. And if you get in touch with the deeper team, they will be able to direct you to the right people in DG Reform, and that allows them to have an overview of the projects that are coming down the pipeline for 2022 as a whole. So those aren't shared on the website per se, but that's something we can draw on, and we can share our insight on that. In terms of, then there are a couple of questions from Tony Shannon. The first is to do with multi-country projects, and that's whether those projects should be, formally a single project, or if they can be, whether they can be separate applications. I think what we're saying at the moment is that they should be formally separate but informally coordinated requests. So, and that would allow us to fuse the two requests at a later date, and you could use the template, a part of the template that refers to multi-country request, to indicate that you're interested in the request becoming a multi-country one. So there would be scope there for making contact with other authorities from other member states, and certainly if on the DG Reform side we pick up an interest in collaboration with Irish government departments, that's something that we'll forward and actively promote. In terms of, I mean, there's a specific question here to do with the regional and local authorities flagship, and the question of whether it's better for that project to fall under a flagship or be a general request. I mean, I think that's the $1 million question, and it will depend on the individual request, and that's something that we're very happy to follow up on. If you'd like to speak to, I think that would be our unit B2, but I think the colleagues in Deeper can forward you to your email to the right place, and that's something that Mina was presenting earlier. But I mean, I think I can maybe just repeat what Natalie, our director, was saying earlier, and that is that there's no earmarked budget for flagships. So and there's no particular priority. So there's no sort of a priori reason why it would be better to have a flagship than a general request. Although flagships perhaps align with certain priorities, and in that sense they might make life easier. Then there was a question from Amanda Daly about whether it's possible to submit a request that's not specifically within the Recovery and Resilience Plan, but falls under a broader digital transformation agenda. Yes, that is possible. It doesn't need to be in the RRP. And indeed, 3 of our flagships are in the digital area. So this is something we're very much promoting, and even beyond the flagships themselves, if there's a link to EU legal and policy instruments, there's something urgent coming up, or there's a factual need, and you have a mature request, that's something that we would welcome out with the scope of both the flagships and any specific link to the RRP. So there was a question then just to have a link to the flagship projects, which I can put in the chat afterwards, but that's included in the material that you'll receive afterwards as well. So I think those are all the questions that I saw. Before, there's one here on the child guarantee, which I suggest we follow up with bilaterally afterwards. So yes, I hope that we can do that via the colleagues in Deeper. So I hope that was helpful, and thank you very much for your attendance today.
That's great, Alistair. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure some of you will have more questions after, or that we didn't get to all the questions today. So I might ask Owen if he would just put up the final slide from me. Just to say, first of all, our thanks very much to the Minister of State and to Director Natalie Berger and all our representatives from DG Reform today, also from Philip Newsom as well, from our national recipient side. Thanks for all the participants today. I will remind you the closing date for applications is close of business on Friday the 8th of October. Please, any queries that you have or if you want to get in touch or us to put you in touch with our colleagues in DG Reform, please, it's Ireland TSI funding at per.gov.ie, and myself and Evan and Eilish on the team there would be only happy to put you in touch or answer the queries if we can from our side on it. So if there's nothing else for today, I'm sorry we kept you a little bit over time, and I hope you found it beneficial, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'm having lots of applications in from Ireland for the TSI funding this year. So thanks to everybody, and take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.